So we're going to be talking about the gendered body. Get ready, everyone, because this is going to get a little complicated. So in Western society, we have something we call a gender binary. Basically, what this means is that there are two accepted types of genders, and you are labeled as or gendered as one of these two extremes. There are men who have penises and women who have vaginas. Depending on what kind of body you're said to have when you're born, you're supposed to act, dress, and look a certain way. Women are supposed to have petite figures, things like thin waistlines, short statures, and narrow noses. They're supposed to act femininely and dress femininely and always be kind and nurturing. Men, on the other hand, are supposed to have stronger bodies. They have to have things like strong jawlines and broad shoulders. They're supposed to dress masculinely and they're supposed to be aggressive. These kinds of attributes are often referred to as gendered because they refer to one of the binary genders but not the other. For example, women are expected to wear makeup to maintain a youthful appearance, whereas for men it's considered strange or even deviant for them to wear makeup. All of these gendered attributes combine to form what gender you're read as by society. However, in our society in particular, there's also a huge emphasis placed on the physical body when it comes to gender. For trans men and women in particular, the body, in addition to other gendered markers, become hugely important in the process of passing, which means to appear as though you're a cisgendered individual. Cisgender refers to an individual whose gender that they were assigned at birth matches the one that they personally come to identify as. This idea of passing largely exists in order to uphold the gender binary. The idea is there's only two genders and you have to look a certain way to be that gender, so that people can automatically gender you without having to ask questions or think outside the box. From here, we get this idea of normality. There's only two genders, you're one of those genders, and you act a certain way depending on that gender. Society, as it turns out, is super obsessed with the idea of normality. But what happens if you don't fit into this prescribed gender binary? The world is complicated and messy, and there are tons of people who just plain don't fit into the gender binary. Even the basis upon which we base the binary, the idea of a biological sex, becomes more complicated if we look at it more deeply. If you've ever taken an intro biology course, you probably learned that males have XY chromosomes, which leads to the development of a penis, and women have XX chromosomes, which leads to the development of a vagina. However, even if you ignore the huge population of people who don't just have XX or XY chromosomes, what we define as a penis and vagina is a little more complicated than that. One example of this complication is what is known as a phallometer. The phallometer illustrates what is deemed acceptable for male and female genitalia. For girls, the clitoris should be under 3/8 of an inch, whereas for boys, the penis should be over 1 inch. And being born intersex isn't some kind of highly rare 1 in a million chance type of event. According to a paper published by the American Journal for Human Biology, as many as 2 in 100 people could be considered intersex, meaning that the combination of their genitalia, their secondary sex characteristics, or their chromosomes means that they do not fit comfortably under the banners of man or woman. That might not sound like a lot, but what it means is that in the US alone, there are an estimated 6 million people whose bodies do not fit into the gender binary. That's enough people to say that even if intersex individuals in the US only existed in Maryland, which has a population of over 5.9 million as of 2014, the entire population of Maryland would be intersex. I'm on to you, Maryland. In addition to intersex individuals whose bodies don't line up with the gender binary, there are also people whose gender identities don't line up with the gender binary. There are huge varieties of people who fall into this category. There are people whose gender does not match their genitalia, people whose gender is independent of their genitalia, people with no gender at all, people with more than one gender, people whose gender may change from day to day, people whose gender is not man or woman, people whose gender may almost feel like man or woman but not quite. What I'm getting at is there are lots of different types of people with lots of different types of genders. Gender is as varied and as nuanced as the people it describes, and it is impossible to say that gender can be confined to a gender binary. I, for example, identify as demigirl, which is one of the genders that falls outside the gender binary. Unfortunately for me, it's also one of the non-binary genders not a lot of people know about. So what does demigirl mean? When you Google demigirl, this is the definition that comes up. Demigirl, also called a demi-woman or demi-female person, is a gender identity describing someone who partially, but not wholly, identifies as a woman, girl, or otherwise feminine, whatever their assigned gender at birth. I identify as demigirl because I am also gender fluid. Gender fluid is defined as a gender identity which refers to a gender which varies over time. For me, my gender fluctuates regularly between agender, meaning I am genderless, and female. Demigirl is the label that felt right for my particular situation and my experience of gender. But there are also people who have had similar experiences with gender and instead choose a different label, things like gender flux or non-binary. Because of my gender experience and because of my identity, there are some gender rituals that I've been told to perform because of the gender that I'm read as that become a little more complicated when I understand them in the context of being a demigirl. The decisions on whether or not to perform gendered rituals like dressing feminine, shaving my legs, and putting on makeup is not only confined to whether or not I want to look feminine that day, but also whether or not I feel feminine that day. However, because I'm often read as female by observers, these gendered rituals are a little easier and the decisions are a little easier than if my body were to be read as male. In our patriarchal society, man is considered the default, whereas women is considered something other. That's a big reason why it's okay for women to wear pants, but men can't wear skirts. Even though pants are masculine, it's okay to be a man. But skirts are feminine and therefore must be confined to the feminine gender. Otherwise, it becomes strange and unnatural. In my case, dressing more masculinely is not necessarily socially encouraged, but it is also not taboo. In our society, man is considered the default and man is considered better. So why would I not want to emulate that? However, for people whose bodies are read as more masculine and then want to dress or act in a more feminine way, this becomes considered abnormal by society. In this scenario, the individual is seen as mimicking a less respected sex, and they in turn become less respected. This concept of masculine individuals becoming less respected when they emulate femininity is a concept that is very well explained by non-binary activist Tyler Ford in an interview they did in August with The Guardian. There's also a very good interview that Refinery29 did with Alok Ved Menon that talks about the same issues. Links for both of those are in the description if you want to check them out, and I highly recommend them. Now that we have knowledge about non-binary and intersex people, how do we go about integrating that knowledge into our everyday lives? There are lots of strategies you can use to make non-binary, intersex, and trans people more comfortable around you and make the spaces you provide more welcoming. But here are the big ones. Number 1, don't ask about their biological sex. This extends to asking questions like, what were you born as? Do you have a penis or a vagina? Or what is your real name? The bottom line is, that's their business, not yours. You wouldn't ask some person you ran up to on the street what their genitalia looks like, and you wouldn't ask someone that you just met about whether or not the name they provide is the name that their parents gave them at birth. So why should it be any different for trans, intersex, and non-binary people? Number 2, keep track of pronouns. This includes not only actively making sure that you're using the pronouns someone has told you that they use, but also creating an environment in which people are comfortable using their pronouns with you without fear of repercussion. One of the big things people can do to create a better environment for trans, intersex, and non-binary people is use the pronoun they to refer to people whose gender or pronouns they don't necessarily know. This makes a more open environment in which pronouns and their use can be discussed. Number 3, be a supporter, not an interviewer. If someone chooses to discuss the specifics of their gender with you, or chooses to come to you to discuss their gender confusion, don't make it into an interview. just because there are aspects of a person's gender you don't understand. Don't make it a debate. Don't make it about you. Just listen to them and be as supportive as you possibly can. And finally, number 4. It's about them, not you. If your child is trans, your experience having a trans child does not trump their experience of being trans. If you mess up someone's pronouns, make it clear to them that you're going to work harder in the future and that you're sorry, but don't make it a pity party for you. This is their experience in their lives, and you just need to make it as easy for them as possible. Well, that's the end of the video. Check out the Women's Studies 460 channel for more videos on the body, and thanks for watching.